Hello and welcome each and every one of you to our podcast, 50 to 70 Meaningful Conversations Between Men. We want to welcome the audience. I'm here with my co-host, Darius and Peter. My name is Peter Callan, and hopefully you've listened to some of our earlier podcasts. Today, we have a challenging topic to talk about. Challenging for any of us who have parents, parents who are aging. So our topic today is aging parents. Darius, how are you? What do you want our audience to prepare for as we spend these next 20 to 30 minutes? Where would you like to bring their focus?
Yeah, I think there's two things that we need to cover as we're going through this. One is the logistics and all of the practical requirements that are associated with aging parents. And the second thing are the emotional dynamics that come into play. But I was talking to a friend of mine, Dave. He's got extensive experience in the senior care space. And he gave me a great quote that I think summarizes what is going on really well, which is aging parents is like having children. The difference is that when you're having children and you're raising them to be independent and capable of standing on their own.
Yes.
With aging parents, you're managing the loss of their independence. And I'll say that again. You're managing the loss of their independence. And that's why you need to have both those logistical, practical accommodations put in place, as well as be prepared that you're going to go through some emotional manifestations that you may or may not have been anticipating.
Yes. Agree.
So when you're in your 50s, let's talk about the logistics that are required and the importance of having those conversations with your parents about what their wishes and their desires are. Did you have those conversations early with your mom?
I tried, and with some success.
Okay.
Was able to get her to, do some of the things that need to be done in the event that she can't make the decisions for herself.
Yeah.
In particular, a will, and I also had some responsibilities for her financial investments. And so we did some planning there so that she could have resources as she aged. But still, even with all of that, there was one thing that couldn't be anticipated, and it created difficulties later. But we did do some planning.
Yeah, and I think the planning that you alluded to, the will, power of attorney,
Yes.
bank accounts,
Yes.
where assets are, where other important documents are, all of those basic dotting I's and crossing T's so that when the time comes, you're not left scrambling. You're not unaware that there's an obligation of debt that needs to be satisfied. You're aware of what their wishes were.
Yes.
Right, where they want to have their final resting place be. They are taken care of, and you don't have to worry while you're processing that emotion of them passing with all of the logistics, which can be overwhelming.
They are. But I'll share my own experience with what's really overwhelming is staying current with whatever you've put in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you my own personal experience. For instance, I didn't know my mother rewrote her will. Things happened where, and we still don't have explanations, where joint accounts that had been set up got disjointed, for lack of a better word, disconnected. And as I said, the one shocker was that in the midst of these changes to what had been set up in a much more planned and controlled way, my mother started losing her cognitive abilities. And so we couldn't have the discussions we'd had earlier in my 50s. as I approached 60s and beyond. It wasn't part of her capability. And that's something that, if I'm to share anything with our audience, is that you set these things up. You're talking about the logistics, and yes, so important. But once you do, to stay on top of them, stay current, and to also anticipate a shock like this is not so much unfathomable anymore, where parents are suffering dementia or Alzheimer's and losing their cognitive abilities. That's part of aging, or it's an accepted part of aging. Let's put it that way.
Let's challenge that one.
Yeah, we do. You and I do in our conversations and in the episodes that we've done. But it is a fact. It is a reality. And I think we owe it to our audience to bring it to their attention.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I think we need to ask the question, why aren't people in their 50s having these conversations with their parents?
Well, they're difficult conversations.
They are.
And just in terms of the privacy of another adult, much less your parent, with whom you have relationships decades long and judgments and emotions, the conversations are extremely difficult.
They are.
And sometimes parents don't choose to engage, and they still treat you and view you as a child, even though you're a fully mature adult.
Lots of reasons to avoid this one. Guilt, right, on either side.
Yeah.
Fear, you're looking into the future and you're talking about their passing.
Yes.
Anger over issues that days, weeks, months, years, decades potentially there. Resentment. Man, I love that quote about resentment. It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person's going to die. But there's so much that needs to be discussed. You need to discuss, where do you want to age? Do you want to age at home? Do you want to go to a retirement center? What are the advantages and disadvantages of both? What's important to you? Going back to our episode on purpose. Where's your purpose? How do we continue to infuse purpose as you age? What activities do you want to do? When is the sign? Because if you're losing your cognitive function, that you need to be moved. Is it a fall? Is it when something catastrophic happens? Are there little signs before something bad happens? A really emotional subject, the financial situation. You're now having a parent sharing their finances with a child.
Yeah.
Right? Which has just emotional complications abound from those conversations. The legal documents that we talked about, and then joint accounts. So there's just so many different nuances of this conversation that need to take place. And you're right. Once a document's updated, it will continue to need to be updated.
You got to check it.
You do every 2 to 3 years to make sure nothing has changed. So when we're talking about this, let's talk about briefly the what could go wrong if you don't have these conversations.
A lot of things could go wrong.
Yeah, we don't need to spend hours on this one.
Yeah. I think the highlighted things that could go wrong normally are in the area of the financial and, the capacity, the ability to fund decisions that may have to be taken that weren't planned for. Like, many of the realities of adulthood and our finances, sometimes there are unexpected expenses.
Yes.
But in the case of aging parents, these are expenses you can plan for. You could anticipate, make sure there are enough funds set aside if you have the capacity to set funds aside. So things that could go wrong is that, you don't have enough money to pay for the accommodations that you would prefer or your parent would prefer to be able to have as their living situation as they age. And in that case, a plan for what the backup is also kind of important.
Yeah, I think about it. The hamster in my head can get going on this one. Someone who is losing their cognitive abilities could be taken advantage of by an unscrupulous individual and find themselves out a significant amount of money. They could find themselves living in a situation that they don't want to live in because the resources aren't available for other options. Or, and I've seen this one happen far too many times, after the passing, the will isn't clear, or maybe it is, and the siblings battle amongst each other over the estate. And the only person who wins in that situation, obviously, are the lawyers that are representing each. But then you think about the emotional damage that is being done to the family on the passing.
Yeah, you actually interjected something that I was thinking, but not at the time of the reading of the will. How about before, when you're with your siblings and other family members trying to agree on what would be the best care accommodation for your aging parent?
Mm-hmm.
You know, siblings won't always agree. And so in terms of things you might not anticipate, you're going to have, and a lot of this will reflect the history of the family and the interactions.
Oh, it all comes to bear. It absolutely does. But the fact that you might not be aligned with your siblings, and there is no way to define it.
Yeah.
There's one thing I will say, there's no right answer here. There's no playbook. Every individual situation is unique, and every individual situation is going to require that thoughtful approach.
Yeah. Well, I think that's been a common theme in our podcast, is we're not suggesting how or what to fix or rescue, because we don't know our audience's particular individual or family situation. And you and I believe, truly honor and respect the uniqueness and specialness of each of everyone audience members. Yes.
Yeah. So normally we have a call to action at the end, but this is one of those episodes where we're going to put 2 call to actions in. And this one,
go for it.
Right at the start, if you haven't started this dialogue with your parents yet, start the dialogue with your parents, and you can make it simple. Where is your will? Do you have a will? Who is your power of attorney? Who is your healthcare proxy? When was your will updated? To Peter's point, if it was written in 1990, it needs to be updated to reflect where they are at right now. Start the dialogue, because Peter's point is apt. If there is a major event or a loss of mental acuity, you're not going to be able to have these conversations.
Yeah. And we mentioned mental acuity, but you and I have talked about physical. And so aging also, if you're not taking care, sometimes results in diseases or
things can go fast.
Yeah. Disability that was not anticipated.
Yeah. Agreed. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about the emotional dynamics that go on with aging parents. Because I think my hypothesis is the aging parent brings up a plethora of dynamics, conscious and subconscious. They could be all the way back from childhood. They could be brought to the surface. And as a result, when you're having the conversation with siblings, with the parent, they need to be approached with love, empathy, kindness, and compassion.
So true.
And I'm going to say, this is one of those ones where I'm trying to practice what I preach. I don't always do it, but I found that when I approach it that way and putting myself in my mom's shoes, how is she feeling? What is she thinking? It's easier. So from the position of the elderly parent, what do you think is going on in their head? How are they feeling? What is driving their reactivity or their responsiveness?
Again, I can't speak for majority or all, maybe for any other elderly person, parent. But I will say that, not that it could lead to unexpected emotions. I will say, and this could be debated, that it will surface long buried emotions from the childhood, because that's the nature of our relationship with our parents. And maybe down the road we'll have an episode on parenting and parents.
Mm-hmm.
But when you reach that stage where now your children, who you raised to independence, as we opened up at the very beginning, are now challenging your independence, it stirs all kinds of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Fear, anger, worry, doubt, all the things you had mentioned, but in a way that now it's very raw.
Mm-hmm.
It's very real now. And maybe that's sometimes why the elderly, aging parent doesn't want to have the conversation, because they have no experience with handling these emotions and discussing these emotions, being mindful of these emotions.
And those are powerful, powerful emotions because they are associated with their own mortality that is being discussed.
Yeah. No one wants to talk about their vulnerability to begin with, but now we're talking about the final vulnerability, which is
death. And I think that point you raised about the patterns coming back, the parent knows you and has exerted varying levers to raise you, to guide you, and to, don't want to use the word, but to control you.
Yes.
Emotional, physical,
Yes.
mental, financial. Those levers aren't there because you're not a 12-year-old boy or girl anymore. You're now a fully grown, functioning adult. But they're still going to pull those levers. Yeah. And unless you're mindful, you're going to pull the lever in response because you have been conditioned over decades that this is the dance the two of you have.
Yeah. And we need to point out that conditioning is not conscious.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not.
It's not intentional. That's not what's going on here. But if you practice part of what we've been sharing over the weeks, paying attention, more awareness, you'll notice, oh, this is very familiar to me. And maybe you'll choose, how are you going to react? Or are you going to be responsive now, especially in a moment so critical, so important, where you need to be balanced and neutral, not combative or not without compassion, kind.
But it's tough from the perspective of the child. And, I'm going through this. You've been through this. It's not a feeling, but you're confused because you don't know exactly what to do, or there's no right answer. It's not like, I cut myself, I need to go to the doctor. You're angry. There's a lot of different reasons why you could be angry. You're afraid. Yeah. You could be grief-stricken, right? You're processing that chunk of grief. There could be guilt. There could be anxiety. So from the perspective of the child, it's not easy to initiate that dialogue either. And it's far easier to not. So you guys all know by now that I'm a bit of a surfer. And when I'm out on the water, I have this guy that I go surfing with all the time. We have a saying, and it's ignorance is bliss until kablamo. Kablamo usually isn't a very pleasant thing. No. How's that wave look? I don't know. I'm going to go for it. And you look over your shoulder and there's this monster about to break on you. Ignorance is bliss, and then kablamo. So what we're trying to say here is start having those conversations now.
Yes. Yeah. And how I would like to be helpful in this, in light of these emotions that are so raw and so powerful, is to help the audience, if they're experiencing this, to acknowledge, be aware of it, and don't judge it. Mm-hmm. It's okay if you feel fear, if you're feeling angry or guilt. Don't run away from it. Running away from it's going to activate your sympathetic nervous system and activate all kinds of mechanisms that are unconscious, quite likely.
Peter, what is the dance of trauma and drama, and how does that apply here?
The something I've learned through my study of yoga is that early on we experience imprints to our psyche from every experience, almost every moment of our lives. And some of them leave an indelible mark. They're not all bad. They're not all good. And I've come to understand some of them that were good turned out to be bad. Some of them that were bad turned out to be good. And so there's no judgment that serves you well. It just is.
It is.
But one of them that we perceive as and judge as bad is normally trauma. It's an event, an experience in our lives that causes us pain. We have a painful experience. And withdrawal from, let's say, love, withdrawal from feeling cared for, feeling nurtured, is what we experience with our parents early on. So it's like an addiction. And that generates a certain want, need that is traumatic. Sometimes traumatic throughout our lives. Again, they're not like clear experiences always. It's just you love your parents so much. You want their attention. You desire their love. And you don't get it. And you're sad and you feel grieved. And you're only like 2-3 years old and you don't really understand what's going on.
It's interesting because as I think about that, fast forwarding 50, 60 years, I think it's your opportunity to clear the air with your parent and to make peace. I mean, I believe in a lot of Buddhist principles, and you're going to keep going around until you get it right. So take that chance to have those conversations that you need to have. And again, not from the angry, fear-based perspective, but from kindness, compassion, loving, empathetic, recognizing they're afraid. They know, part of them knows that something is going on, something's not right, there's a disease. And so take that opportunity to have those dialogues. And when you're having those moments, those good moments, be there for those good moments with your parent. Be fully there, be aware, and enjoy them.
Yes. Yeah.
So you had a quote here, Peter, that I had that aging parents are not burdens. They are our roots. They are the foundation upon which we stand, the wisdom that guides us, and the love that sustains us through life's journey. That's such a powerful thesis and way to approach aging parents.
It is.
When my mom turned 80, I wrote her a letter thanking her for being my mom. That was my gift to her. She doesn't need anything. It was a 2-page handwritten acknowledgement of the service that she did. And, you know, no parent does everything right, but you have to respect and acknowledge that they were your parents. And they consciously or subconsciously put a number of beliefs into you and showed you how this world works.
As best they could.
As best they could.
What they knew.
And, you know, that gradation, as best they could with what they knew, is very wide. Because we don't know the struggles they were going with. We don't know how they were raised.
No.
Right? So we don't know the conditioning or the beliefs they had.
No, we don't. And with compassion and kindness, whatever it was they experienced, we can accept and just let it be. And let the relationship also be presently, not what it was before.
Exactly. So that's the second call to action for everyone here, which is to approach your experience with your aging parents with love, compassion, and care. You're going to need to be patient, kind, and gentle, recognizing that this is it's a very emotionally charged situation that we are all walking into.
Yeah. And just to be clear, and you correct me if I'm wrong.
Please.
Darius isn't talking about being kind, gentle, patient, compassionate, just with your parent, but also with yourself.
Absolutely. Practice good self-care while you're going through this.
Yes.
And there's something called caregiver fatigue.
Yes.
It's real.
Yeah, it is.
So as we wind down and prepare to close this episode, we're at the point where we normally read a poem. And Peter, I think you have something prepared for us.
Yes, I do. And I'm delighted to read it. It's called Each Passing Day. With each passing day, as years unfold, I cherish the stories and challenges your wrinkles hold. Each line a tale of love, of joy, of strife, weaved into the fabric of your so rich and vibrant life. As time gentle hands bestows its grace, I see the beauty in every weathered and tattered trace. For within each crease, each tear, each imprint, there lies a story, a testament to your resilience and enduring glory. So let us embrace the precious gift, this precious gift of time. Savor each moment, both yours and mine. For in the twilight of life, we find our true worth. We find our true worth in those shared moments we had of conversation, laughter, love, and mirth.
Just wonderful, Peter. Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
So with that, recognizing that many people in the audience are going through this experience, and as you can tell from Peter and my conversation, we both got firsthand experience. Treat yourself with a lot of love.
Yes.
A lot of kindness. Recognize that this is challenging and be patient and drop us a line. The videos will be posted at agedifferently.com. Let us know how you're doing with this and if something we said made a difference for you.
Please do. And please take care of you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter.